The message I wasn't expecting. I hadn't thought about Emma in years. Not in the way that makes your chest ache. Anyway, life had its way of dulling even the sharpest memories, like waves smoothing the edges of sea glass. Still, when her name popped up on my phone that night, Emma Hayes, I froze. It was a Tuesday, early spring. The air still carried the bite of winter, and my apartment window let in a low hum of campus noise. Laughter, music, the distant bark of a dog. I had just finished grading essays for the Intro to Psychology course I was assisting in, my eyes sore and my head numb. My life was quiet, methodical, safe. I liked it that way. But seeing her name again felt like a door I'd nailed shut years ago had suddenly swung open. "Hey!" Her message read. "Are you still in town?" I stared at it for a long time. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, then dropped the phone onto the couch. It had been 7 years since Emma and I had spoken. 7 years since that awful spring break when everything fell apart. I was 21 then, she was 20. We thought we were invincible, and maybe that's what made the fall hurt so much. Back then, she was the golden girl of campus. Journalism major, camera always hanging from her neck, a light in her eyes that made people lean in when she talked. I was a quiet psychology student, more comfortable behind a desk than in a crowd. Somehow we fit. She made noise where I made calm. I made sense where she made storms. Until one day she didn't call back. No fight, no closure, just silence. Took me months to stop checking my phone. Years to stop replaying the last conversation. Eventually, I learned not to expect answers from the past. And now, 7 years later, she wanted to know if I was still in town. I typed and erased at least 5 replies before I settled on, "Yeah, still here. You?" The message sent before I could overthink it. She responded almost immediately, "I'm back, just for a few weeks. Can we catch up?" That's when my stomach dropped. The next few days were a blur of rationalizations. It's just coffee. It doesn't mean anything. People change. But beneath every excuse was a quiet, humming tension I couldn't shut off. What did she want after all these years? An apology? Forgiveness? Closure? By Saturday morning, I still hadn't answered. The weather had turned warmer. Cherry blossoms lining the main quad were just starting to open. I walked to the cafe near the old campus library, the one we used to haunt between classes. It looked the same. Mismatched furniture, soft indie music, espresso steam clouding the air. I sat by the window, watching students rush past with laptops and headphones. Time had moved forward, but part of me hadn't. And then I saw her. Emma walked in like a ghost stepping into daylight, familiar and foreign all at once. Her hair was shorter now, her eyes framed by glasses. She wore a gray coat and a cautious smile. "Hey," she said softly when our eyes met. "Hey," I managed. We hugged, awkward, quick. She smelled faintly of vanilla and rain. For a moment, the years between us folded away. We talked for almost 2 hours. About work, family, mutual friends who drifted apart. She was a freelance journalist now, covering small-town stories for regional magazines. I taught part-time at the university and worked on a PhD dissertation I secretly hated. Our conversation danced around the obvious. Neither of us mentioned us. When the silence finally came, it wasn't heavy. It was curious, fragile. "I heard about your dad," she said quietly. "I'm sorry." I nodded. "Yeah, it was rough for a while." She hesitated. "I should have reached out. I wanted to. I just didn't know how." There it was, the shadow of our past, sitting right between the coffee cups. After she left, I sat there long after my cup went cold. The truth was simple. I wasn't over her. Not completely. I'd built an entire life around pretending I was. But one look, one conversation, had cracked the shell I'd spent years hardening. And maybe, though I didn't dare say it yet, she hadn't been over me either. That night, she texted again. "It was really good to see you. Maybe dinner next time?" I stared at the screen, heart thudding. I could say no. I should say no. But curiosity is a dangerous comfort. "Sure," I replied. Let me know when. And just like that, something old, something I thought was dead, began to stir again. The dinner that didn't feel like closure. The following week crawled by. My days were full: lectures, lab meetings, advising sessions, but my mind was elsewhere. Every break in routine became a space for thoughts of Emma to slip through. It was like trying to stop water with my hands. We finally agreed on Thursday night. She picked the place, a small restaurant near the edge of campus, the kind that tried too hard to be rustic but somehow pulled it off. Exposed brick walls, Edison bulbs, the faint smell of rosemary and wine. I arrived early, as I always do. I watched people drift in and out, couples laughing, servers balancing trays. When she walked in, the air shifted. She wasn't dressed up. Not really: jeans, a navy sweater, hair loose over her shoulders. But she looked settled, like she'd found her rhythm again. "Hey," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "Hey." We ordered wine. Small talk carried us through the first glass: work stress, bad drivers, the price of rent. Comfortable, even easy. For a moment I let myself believe that maybe this was just closure, that maybe we were finally two adults catching up over dinner. Then she said, "I still think about that summer sometimes." And just like that, the air changed. That summer, the one that ended everything, was a blur of heat and fear and mistakes we both refused to own. She had landed a journalism internship in Boston. I was supposed to visit, but my father had fallen ill, and I couldn't leave. We called less than barely at all. One night she confessed she'd gone to a party with her colleagues, had too much to drink, and kissed someone. "It didn't mean anything," she said, "but it did. Not because of the kiss itself, but because she hadn't told me until months later, and only after I'd asked why she'd been so distant. We tried to fix it. We promised honesty, trust, communication. All the usual words people use when they're already standing on ruins. But it didn't work. The last message I ever sent her back then was 3 words. I can't anymore. Now, sitting across from her, all that history hummed between us. "I wasn't fair to you," she said quietly. I didn't answer. I was young, scared. I thought I wanted freedom, but what I really wanted was not to feel guilty for wanting it. Her honesty was sharper than I expected. It landed somewhere between apology and confession. "I made mistakes too," I said finally. I shut down. I thought pretending not to care would protect me. She smiled faintly. "You always did hide behind logic." That stung. Not because she was wrong, but because she remembered. We ate mostly in silence after that. The food was good, but I barely tasted it. When the bill came, I insisted on paying. Old habits. She rolled her eyes but didn't argue. Outside, the night was cool, the kind of cool that carries the smell of rain and asphalt. We stood there awkwardly, neither wanting to end the moment but both unsure what to say next. "I don't know why I reached out," she said finally. I was driving past the old library last week and thought of you. And then I couldn't stop thinking. Sometimes I wish I didn't think so much," I said. She laughed softly. "You haven't changed." "Maybe not enough," I replied. There was a pause. Then she said, "Can I walk you back?" That surprised me. I nodded. The walk to my apartment took 10 minutes. Streetlights painted gold lines across the sidewalk. We talked about trivial things. Books, favorite movies, the campus renovations. Anything to keep from stepping on emotional landmines. When we reached my door, she hesitated. "I'm glad we did this," she said. "Me too." She smiled, small and real. "Good night, Michael." And then she was gone. Inside, I leaned against the closed door, feeling the quiet press against me. I told myself dinner would bring closure. It hadn't. If anything, it reopened something I'd carefully buried. The ache was familiar, but now it came with a strange warmth, like pain mixed with relief. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat by the window. Campus lights flickered in the distance. Students laughed somewhere below. For the first time in years, I wanted to write, not notes or research, words that meant something. I opened my old journal, the one I hadn't touched since before Emma left. The first page I saw was dated March 2018. I think loving someone means being brave enough to stay even when it hurts, until the hurt becomes something else. I stared at it for a long time, then I picked up my pen. A few days later, she texted again. There's an art exhibit this weekend. You used to love those. Want to come? I started typing, I can't, but stopped halfway, because I could. And maybe, just maybe, I wanted to. The exhibit and the echo. Saturday came draped in gray, the kind of sky that looks like it could cry at any moment but never does. I walked to the art building with my hands in my jacket pockets, trying to convince myself that this was just another outing. Just friends catching up. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Emma was already there when I arrived, standing in front of a painting of two figures walking apart in a field of muted color. She didn't hear me at first. Her head tilted slightly, lips pressed together, like she was listening to something the paint itself was trying to say. Still drawn to the sad ones, huh? I said quietly. She turned, startled for a second, then smiled. They're not sad, just honest. I stepped beside her, studying the piece. Two people, nearly silhouettes, walking in opposite directions, their shadows reaching for each other but not quite touching. Looks like goodbye to me, I said. Or maybe they'll turn around, she countered. We both laughed softly, and something about the sound felt fragile. The exhibit was small student work mostly, with a few local artists mixed in. We walked slowly, pausing in front of each piece. Sometimes she'd explain the technique, sometimes I'd guess the psychology behind the imagery. It was easy in a way I hadn't expected. The old tension between us still hummed quietly, but now it wasn't sharp, more like background music. At one point, she reached out to touch my sleeve, pointing toward a sculpture made of broken glass. Look at this. Isn't it beautiful? It was. Jagged shards arranged into the shape of a heart, light catching in the cracks. Reminds me of us, she said, then quickly added, I mean back then. Messy, but it caught the light sometimes. I smiled. That's one way to put it. After the exhibit, we walked toward the quad. The air smelled of rain-soaked pavement. Students sprawled across the grass, laughing, taking photos of the blossoms. Emma looked around. You know, I used to think this campus was endless. Now it feels small. Maybe we just got bigger, I said. She nodded thoughtfully. You always say things like that. Simple but true. We sat on a bench under a cherry tree. Petals drifted down, landing in her hair. Without thinking, I brushed one away. My fingers grazed her temple, soft, familiar. The moment lingered too long. She didn't move. Michael? She began, but her voice trailed off. What? She looked down at her hands. Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't broken up? I finished for her. Yeah. I let the question hang between us. Sometimes. But then I remember who I was back then. I wasn't ready to be in anything real. And I thought I was, she said. But I didn't even know myself yet. Silence stretched. Then she laughed softly. God, we sound old. I smiled. We sound like people who survived their 20s. Started raining then, slow at first, then steady. We ran under the nearest awning, laughing like idiots. Her hair clung to her face, and she was still beautiful in that quiet, effortless way that hurt to look at. We stood close, breath visible in the cool air. You know, she said, I never told you why I didn't call after everything ended. I looked at her. You didn't owe me that. I did, she said firmly. I was ashamed. You didn't deserve silence. But I thought if I stayed away long enough, you'd forget. And then I could forgive myself easier. Did it work? She shook her head. Not really. Something in my chest loosened then. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. You can't fix the past, I said quietly. But you can stop living in it. She smiled sadly. Are you? I'm trying. We walked in the rain for a while longer. When we reached the old campus bridge, she stopped. The river below was dark and restless. This place, she said softly. It feels like another lifetime. It was, I replied. She looked at me then, really looked. I missed this. Talking to you. Being seen. Yeah, I said. Me too. There was nothing else to say. But there didn't need to be. The silence felt full. Like a promise neither of us was ready to make, but both of us understood. That night I couldn't sleep. Her words replayed in my head. I missed being seen. I thought about all the people who'd passed through my life since her. The short-lived dates, the quiet dinners, the almosts. None of them had ever reached that same depth. With Emma, even silence had meaning. Maybe it wasn't love anymore. Maybe it was something rarer, recognition. The next morning, she texted. Thanks for yesterday. I didn't realize how much I needed that. Also, you still overthink everything. I smiled. You still point it out. Some things never change. She added a heart emoji. Small. Harmless. But I stared at it longer than I should have. The weekend trip that wasn't planned. It started with a storm. Friday evening. Heavy clouds rolled over campus, swallowing the last of the light. I was walking back from the psychology lab when Emma called. Not texted, called. That alone startled me. Hey, I answered. Hey, she said, her voice soft under the sound of rain. You busy? Not really. Good. My car battery just died in front of the bookstore, and I can't get roadside assistance to pick up. Any chance you feel like rescuing an old friend? There was a pause, long enough for both of us to hear what neither said aloud. Send me your location, I said. The rain came harder by the time I got there. Emma stood beside her car, jacket pulled tight, hair damp, trying to laugh it off. I swear I didn't plan this, she said. Sure you didn't. She grinned. Okay. Maybe I subconsciously manifested it. I checked the car, the battery was dead. Really dead. You'll need a jump. But I left my cables at home. Figures, she sighed. Guess I'm stranded. My place is closer than any shop, I said. You can wait there until the rain stops. I'll deal with the car later. She hesitated for only a second. All right, but only if there's coffee. Deal. My apartment was small, books everywhere, papers stacked in semi-organized piles, a half-written thesis open on the desk. She stepped in, dripping, laughing. You still live like a grad student. I am a grad student. Fair. I handed her a towel and one of my old hoodies while the coffee brewed. Watching her move through my space again was disorienting. Everything felt familiar and new at the same time, like hearing a favorite song covered by someone else. When she sat on the couch, wrapped in that hoodie, I almost forgot to breathe. You kept this place the same, she said. Same books, same mug, even the same couch. It's comfortable. Or maybe you're afraid of changing things. I smiled faintly. Maybe. The rain didn't stop. If anything, it got worse. Thunder rolled across the sky, windows rattling. Guess I'm stuck here for a bit, she said, pulling her knees up. I don't mind. Neither do I. We talked for hours. About the people we'd become. About regrets that had softened with time. About how she'd left journalism in Boston because the stories stopped feeling human. At one point she asked, do you ever feel like you built your life around not feeling too much? I paused. Every day. She nodded slowly. Me too. The honesty between us felt heavier than the storm outside. Later, when the rain eased, I offered to drive her home. She declined. It's late, she said. I'll just crash here. Couch is fine. I started to protest, but she smiled. Relax. I'm not trying to complicate your life. Too late, I thought. I gave her a blanket and a pillow. She changed into one of my t-shirts and curled up on the couch, half asleep before I even turned off the lights. From my room, I could hear the steady rhythm of her breathing. Rain still whispered against the glass, and for the first time in years I didn't feel alone. In the morning, sunlight cut through the blinds. I found her sitting at the kitchen table, reading my notes. Still analyzing people? She teased. Still running from being analyzed? I shot back. She grinned. Touché. Over coffee, she said. There's this coastal town a few hours from here, Cape Alder. I'm doing a short article on it next week. Could use someone to drive with me. You in? I blinked. You want me to come? Think of it as research, she said. Fieldwork in emotional anthropology. I laughed. You really haven't changed. Then it's settled. That's how the trip happened. Unplanned, impulsive, and strangely natural. When we hit the road, the air between us was easy again. Music played low, her hair whipping in the open window, sunlight flashing across her face. At one point, she turned and said, "Do you ever wonder if timing is just an excuse people use for being scared?" Probably, I said. But it's a good excuse. She smiled. We were bad at timing. Yeah, we were. Cape Alder was small, quiet. Weathered docks, seagulls, coffee shops that smelled of salt and cinnamon. She interviewed locals while I wandered the pier, half listening to the waves. That night, we ate at a diner overlooking the water. She'd taken off her shoes, toes brushing the sand below the deck. This place feels unreal, she said. Maybe it's the salt in the air, I replied. Or maybe it's the company. We looked at each other then. No words, no defenses. Just two people who had once broken each other, now sharing the same silence again. Later, as we walked back to the motel, she slipped her hand into mine. It was small, hesitant, like a question. I didn't answer with words. I just held on. The letter I never sent. A week passed before I saw her again. I was sitting under the old oak near the library when I saw Maya walking with her sketchbook, headphones in, lost in her world. I froze. Every part of me wanted to go talk to her, to fix what I broke. But I didn't move. Instead, I wrote. That night, I sat on my dorm bed and started a letter I never planned to send. Maya, I know I hurt you. I wish I could explain without sounding like a coward. You made me feel something I didn't think I could feel again. That scared me more than I can admit. I pushed you away because I didn't think I deserved you. The words spilled like a confession. Every time I see you, it's like the world slows down. You make me want to be better. I don't know if I'm ready for love, but I know I miss you every damn day. I folded the letter, sealed it, and placed it in my drawer. I never sent it, but writing it helped me realize something. I didn't want to live scared anymore. 2 days later, she found me at the coffee shop. Hey, she said quietly. I turned, startled. Maya, she held up her hand. Don't apologize. I wanted to say I get it. We all have ghosts. I have mine too. We sat there for an hour saying almost nothing. But the silence wasn't heavy this time. It was calm, like two people slowly learning to breathe again. When we left, she smiled faintly. Maybe one day, we'll be ready for each other. Maybe, I said. Or maybe that day's already started. The confession. It happened on a Thursday night. The air was heavy with spring rain, and the sound of droplets against the dorm windows made everything feel slower, softer. I was studying in the library when Maya appeared, her hoodie pulled up, damp from the rain. She looked nervous. Can we talk? She asked. We walked to the quiet corner behind the art building. The lamplight flickered, reflecting off puddles. I need to tell you something, she said. Her voice trembled. Before this, whatever it is between us, goes any further. I braced myself. She took a breath. The reason I transferred here wasn't just for art. My ex, he was at my old college. It was bad. Controlling. He hurt me more than I want to remember. She looked away. I promised myself I wouldn't get close to anyone again. But then I met you and it felt safe. Too safe. And that scared me. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't. I just reached out and took her hand. Gently. I'm sorry you went through that, I said. You don't owe me anything. Not your story. Not your heart. But if you ever decide to trust again, I'll be here. She looked up, tears mixing with rain. You really mean that? I do, I said simply. For a moment, she stepped closer. The space between us dissolved. We didn't kiss. We didn't need to. It was something quieter and understanding. Later, when we said goodnight, she whispered, "Thank you for not asking for more than I can give." That night, lying in bed, I realized love wasn't about fixing someone. It was about holding space for them until they could stand again. The distance between healing and love. After that day, things changed. Not suddenly, more like a quiet drift. Maya still met me for coffee, still smiled when she saw me, but there was a new distance behind her eyes. She stopped answering late-night messages. Our walks got shorter. Sometimes, she'd cancel plans with vague excuses. Too much work, not feeling great, need some time. I told myself to be patient. Healing wasn't linear. But part of me, the part that had started to imagine what we could become, began to ache. One night, after a long week of silence, I saw her sitting alone in the library. Her sketchbook was open, filled with charcoal drawings. Dark waves, tangled lines, faceless silhouettes reaching for each other. I walked over. "Hey," I said softly. She looked up, eyes tired. "Hey, are you okay?" A long pause. "I don't know." She closed the sketchbook, folded her arms. I thought I was ready to move on, to let someone in again. But then Ethan showed up and I realized I'm still scared. "Scared of him?" I asked. "Scared of me," she said. "Of who I was when I was with him. Of losing myself again." I sat down across from her. "You're not that person anymore." She shook her head. "You don't get it. You've been patient, kind, but I can't give you what you want. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time." I wanted to argue, to tell her that love could wait, that I'd wait. But instead, I said the only true thing I could. "I just want you to be okay, even if that means without me." Her eyes softened. "You're too good, you know that?" "Not really," I said. "Just stubborn." We both laughed quietly, but the air between us stayed heavy. When she left that night, I watched her walk out into the rain. Umbrella low, steps slow and uncertain. And I realized something painful but honest. Sometimes, love isn't about holding on. Sometimes it's about giving someone space to heal, even if it means standing alone in the meantime. When the seasons change, the leaves turned golden, then fell, and the cold crept quietly into the streets. They spoke less, their conversations now measured and careful, like they were walking on fragile ice. The laughter that had once filled rooms was replaced by pauses and hesitant smiles. The narrator watched from a distance as memories of warmth flickered in the corners of their mind. They remembered the way hands had fit together, the shared secrets whispered under starry skies, the impulsive adventures that had made ordinary days extraordinary. But now, even these memories felt like fragments of another life, half-remembered and bittersweet. Time passed. They drifted apart, not with a dramatic explosion, but like rivers slowly diverging, finding new courses. The narrator wondered, often in the quiet of early mornings or under the hum of city lights, did love fade, or did it just change shape? Sometimes, they caught glimpses of what had been. A familiar scent, a familiar laugh, and felt a pang of longing. Other times, they recognized that the love had transformed, no longer fiery or urgent, but subtle, enduring in memory and quiet appreciation. And in those moments, they understood that some connections aren't meant to vanish. They simply evolve, shifting with the seasons, reshaping into something that cannot be held in the same hands, but can still live in the heart. Echoes of tomorrow. Winter arrived quietly, covering streets and rooftops in white. The narrator walked alone through familiar places, each step stirring memories that were both comforting and aching. They realized that absence had taught them to see more clearly, to understand the spaces between people as much as the moments they shared. Then, unexpectedly, a message arrived, a simple, tentative hello. Their heart skipped, But this time it wasn't panic or longing. It was curiosity, a gentle recognition that some ties never fully break. They met again, in a cafe warmed by golden light and the soft hiss of steaming cups. Conversation was easier now, tempered by time, honesty, and a new understanding. They laughed, not like before, but differently, richer, with the depth of someone who had learned to let go without losing. The narrator realized that love hadn't disappeared. It had shifted, like rivers that carve new paths, or seasons that transform the world quietly. It existed now in smiles, in understanding, in the decision to meet again without expectation, and in the quiet joy of simply knowing the other was still there. As they parted that evening, the narrator felt a strange serenity. Love, they understood, wasn't always about holding tightly. Sometimes it was about letting go, watching it change shape, and carrying its echo forward into tomorrow.